This is our demo of a Buy Me a Coffee Web3 application. So this is the login screen here. You can see I can sign in with a social login, or I can connect a Web3 wallet. I can select something like MetaMask here. And once I am connected, we have a little screen here that we can tip someone and enter a message, and we can send that tip over to our wallet of this deployed contract. Now, this is the wallet here that I deployed this contract with. You can see here that we have 1.407 ETH in this wallet. I'm on base Sepolia here. Now I'm going to switch this wallet over to another wallet here. You can see this wallet I'm currently in has 0.137, and we're going to send some ETH on over. So I'm just going to send 0.01 here. The tip amount must be greater than 0, and then we can send any message. So we can just say this is a tip for the, let's say, demo on the YouTube video. And then you can see here, once we have a tip amount and a message, I can buy a coffee or send this tip on over. So we can click that button here. This brings us up a transaction. You can see here, this is the 0.01 ETH that I put in on how much I want to tip. We have to pay for the gas and everything here. We'll hit confirm. And there you go. You can see thank you for the coffee. And you can see here, the total coffee count goes up to 7. And then the most recent coffee here was from my wallet address here, ending in B394. Which is my wallet address here, just showing my ENS name though here. It has the date and time in which I sent this over, and it has my message here. So I can do the same thing. I can say, hey, I'm going to send 0.01 again, and we're going to say a message is love the YouTube channel. We'll hit buy coffee. Again, the transaction will come up. We can confirm the tip. There we go. And you can see here, the coffee count goes up to 8 now. Our message is right over here. We have the time that the coffee and everything was, the tip was sent. So if I change back to my other wallet here, let me just come back to the other wallet that I had, the one that is receiving these tips. Once I switch back, you can see here that this wallet now has 1.427. So we got the 0.2 from the 2 tips and the 2 coffees that were purchased for this user here. And this is again what we're going to be building. So we'll have the total coffees. Some of the recent ones that have been sent, they will again just clear out over time, and then we'll have the ability to send a tip amount and a message here. Hey everyone, Sean Watasa here, back with another video, and in today's tutorial video, we're going to be building a very simple Web3 version of the Buy Me a Coffee application. This is essentially a tipping application where people can come connect to your Web3 application, and they can leave you a tip along with a message, and we'll be able to display the recent messages that people have left within your application, and the tips that people will tip will get directly sent and transferred over to the deployment wallet that you deploy the contract with. An overview of what we're going to be covering in this video. We'll first create and then deploy our smart contract for our Buy Me a Coffee application. It'll be a very simple smart contract that we're going to create and then deploy with thirdweb. Then we'll jump into building out our Web3 application utilizing thirdweb's Connect SDK. With all of that said, let's jump on the computer here and let's build out our smart contract first. So on my computer here, I'm going to open up my terminal, and we're going to create our Buy Me a Coffee smart contract first. And to do this, I'm going to create a smart contract with thirdweb. So I'm going to do npx thirdweb, and I'm going to run create contract here. Once that's done, we will name our contract. So I'll just say Buy Me a Coffee contract. You can name it whatever you want to. And I'm just going to use Hardhat here for this tutorial. You can use Forge as well. And then we're going to name our contract here, which is going to be Buy Me a Coffee. And we're going to start off with an empty smart contract. We're going to create this completely from scratch here. Once that is done, we're just going to change into our contract, and we're going to open this up in our code editor. Now, if you used Hardhat like I did, you'll have a contracts folder here, and you'll have a contract solidity file. If you used Forge, you'll see a source folder here, and then you'll find your contract solidity file in that. So we're going to go into our contract solidity file here. I'm going to make sure that this contract is called Buy Me a Coffee. And we're going to start creating our smart contract. Now, this is a very simple smart contract that we're going to be building. All we need to be able to do is transfer funds from a wallet to our deployer wallet, whoever deploys this contract here. And we'll have to just be able to attach a message to the funds that were sent along with the time that they were sent. So to do this, we're going to create a struct here first. And this struct is going to be for our coffee. So this is anytime someone buys a coffee, this is what we will be sending to the blockchain here and recording, and we can pull that data and then display it within our application. So the first thing we want to know is the address of who is sending the tip and the message. So we'll call this sender, and it's going to be a address. Then we need a string that's going to be for the message, so whatever message the person writes. And then we're going to use a uint 256, and this is going to be for the timestamp, so we can put down what time and day that the tip and the message were sent. With that, we're also going to keep track of the number of coffees that are sent. So we're going to create a uint 256, and we're just going to call this one total coffee here. And it's going to be tracking the total amount of coffees and tips and messages that we were sent here through our contract. And then we are going to also set the owner of the contract. So whoever deploys this contract is going to be considered the owner. They're going to be an address. It is going to be a payable address, and we're going to call this owner. Now, whenever a user sends us a tip or buys us a coffee and sends a message to us, we want to emit that information, the information of this coffee struct here, to the blockchain. And we're going to do that via an event. And then we'll be able to pull these events and read the events as they happen and display them in our app. So we're going to create an event here. We're going to call this a new coffee. And this is going to have an event with some data in it. The first thing we're going to do is address. And we're going to index the sender, string for the message, and a uint 256 for the timestamp. So essentially, we're just taking the information of our coffee struct here and creating an event here that will be recorded on the blockchain. And that is what we're going to read to display all of the messages and tips that people have sent us. For our constructor here, the one thing that we are going to do when this contract is deployed is set the owner. And we're going to set the owner to whoever the deployer of the contract is. And we're going to make sure that they are a payable address in here so we can transfer the funds through our buy me a coffee function, which is the next function that we are going to create here. So this next function is going to be our function for buy me a coffee. Now this function is going to take a string, which is going to be the message that the person wants to send. So we'll say string, memory, and we'll say a message here. And this is going to be a public function. It is going to be a payable function because we are sending some funds along with this transaction. And in here, we're first going to require something, and we're going to require that the value being sent is greater than 0. So we don't want to display people's message and just have people message and execute this function. We want to make sure that they are sending some funds or a tip along with the message that they are creating. So we're going to say that the message.value needs to be greater than 0. And then we'll have an error message here that just says, hey, if it's not greater than 0, we're going to display this error that says value must be greater than 0. Next, we're going to just increment the total coffees here by 1, right? If someone buys us a coffee, we just want to increment it. And then we are going to transfer the funds that the person adds within, so whatever value they add within calling this function here, we're going to transfer it over to the owner, whoever the deployer is of this wallet. So we're going to say payable, and we're going to say owner, and we're going to then transfer the message.value. So again, whatever value they're sending with this function is going to get transferred over to the owner of whoever deployed the contract. And then finally, we are going to emit our new coffee event, and we're going to say the sender is the caller of the function, the message is whatever message they send with the function, and then the timestamp is the block.timestamp. So whenever this function here is executed on the blockchain, we capture that timestamp as well and return that within our new event here. And then finally, we're just going to get a function here that gets the total coffee. It's just going to return a uint 256, and all this does is returns our total coffee count right over here, which we are incrementing every time someone buys a coffee. We increment that up by 1. So this function here is just going to return us the value of that variable that we have up here. And that does it for our very simple buy me a coffee smart contract. Again, we have a coffee struct here that is just saying anytime someone buys a coffee, we're getting the address of the sender, the message, and the timestamp that it was sent. We have a variable here for our total coffees. This is just a counter to keep track of how much coffees and tips and messages we are sent. We have a variable here that we are setting the owner, and we're making it payable. And the owner is going to be whoever deploys the smart contract. We have an event here that emits a new coffee every time someone calls the buy me a coffee function. The constructor here sets the owner to whoever is the deployer. The buy me a coffee function requires that the value sent of when calling this function is greater than 0. We increment the total coffees and we send and transfer that value to the owner of the contract, which again is the person that deploys this contract here. And then finally, we emit the new coffee event to the blockchain. And then finally, again, we have the function here to get the total coffee, which just returns our total coffee variable. So once we have all that created, we can deploy our contract. I'm just going to open my terminal here within my code editor, and I'm going to run npx thirdweb and deploy. And this is going to deploy our smart contract using thirdweb here. So you'll see that it'll detect our project, it'll compile it, upload the smart contract data, and then it'll bring us to open a browser tab here, which is going to allow us to deploy this contract directly through thirdweb's dashboard. So you can see here, I am deploying a buy me a coffee smart contract. We don't have any contract parameters or anything, but under the network and chain, I can select this drop down and select any EVM compatible blockchain to deploy my contract to. Now for this tutorial, I'm going to be using the base Sepolia testnet. But again, you can choose any EVM compatible blockchain to deploy to. And once you have it selected, you're just going to hit deploy now. Now you'll get the first transaction here that appears. This is just you paying the gas to deploy the smart contract. So we'll hit confirm. The second pop-up here we're going to get is a signature request to add this contract to our thirdweb dashboard. So all we're going to do here is sign this. And there you go. Once it's deployed, you can be brought to your contract dashboard here. We have our buy me a coffee smart contract. We have our contract address here. And now we can start building out the front end application to interact with this contract. And we're going to be using and creating a Next.js project. So I'm going to come back to my terminal here. Let me just get out of this and clear this. So we're going to run npx create next app. And we're going to create a new project here. I'm going to call this project buy me a coffee app. And when we create this new next project, we are going to say yes to using TypeScript, no to ESLint, no to Tailwind CSS. I'm just going to do some basic styling as we go through the tutorial here. Yes to source directory and app router, and no to customizing the default import alias here. Those are the settings that I'm going to be using in this tutorial to create this project. Once that is done, we're going to change into our buy me a coffee project here. And we are then going to install thirdweb's Connect SDK. Now let me just clear this and bring it to the top. So to install thirdweb's Connect SDK, you can use npm, you can use yarn, pnpn, or bun. You can check out our documentations on how to install thirdweb's Connect SDK into your application. I'm going to be using yarn here, so I'm just going to run yarn add thirdweb to add this to my project. And once that is done, we'll open this project up in our code editor. Now with that open, we can set up and configure the Connect SDK with our project here. I'm going to come into the source folder, and then within the app folder, I'm going to create a new file, and we're going to call this client.ts, and we're going to set up our thirdweb client here. I'm going to create a variable here called client ID. And we are going to store this client ID in our .env file. So we're going to say process.env.next public client ID. Then I'm going to come back to my file directory here. We're going to create that .env file. And in your git ignore, you can add the .env as a file to ignore here. Just come up here. And then in our .env, we're going to create that next public client ID variable, and we're going to get our client ID from thirdweb here under your settings tab. So if you come back to thirdweb's dashboard, you go to settings. This is where your API keys are, and you can just create an API key, and that will give you your client ID that you can use for creating the thirdweb client for the Connect SDK. Now, if you want to watch a tutorial video and learn more about API keys, we'll drop a link down in the description below where we go in more depth about it. But I'm just going to copy my client ID right here, come back to my .env file, paste that in, I'll close that out, and come back to my client.ts file. Next, we're going to create a variable here. We're going to call this our client, and we're going to use the create thirdweb client to create our client for our Connect SDK. We'll make sure that we import this here, and we're going to import it from thirdweb. And all we need to do for our create thirdweb client is provide it with our client ID, which is going to be our client ID variable right up here. We just got to make sure that this is as string. And there you go. We now have a client that we can use throughout our application. I'm going to open up my file directory, and the next thing we're going to set up is defining our chain. So back in the app folder again, I'm going to create another file. This is going to be our chain.ts file. And in our chain.ts file, we're going to export our variable for our chain here. And we are going to use define chain from thirdweb. And define chain, we can provide it a chain ID of the chain that we deployed it to, or you can use some predefined popular chains from thirdweb already. So because I used base Sepolia, this is a predefined chain already. I can just say base Sepolia and import this from thirdweb/chains. If it isn't a predefined chain already, you can just, again, put the chain ID right in here. But we're just going to take this and paste in base Sepolia here. And now we have defined our chain that we can use throughout our application. Last thing we need to do to configure the application to work with our Connect SDK is add one more file here. And we're going to say thirdweb.ts. Now, what we're going to do here is export the thirdweb provider. And the thirdweb provider is what we need to wrap our application with in order for us to use the thirdweb Connect SDK, and this is going to be from thirdweb/React. Now, the reason we're exporting it in this separate file here is so we can tag this file with use client. Because we are using app router, we do need to define here use client, and then all we need to do again is wrap our application with this thirdweb provider. So come back to my files, and if I go to layout.tsx, I'm going to just wrap the children here with the thirdweb provider. So I'm going to come here and we'll say thirdweb provider, and we're just going to make sure that this wraps the children. So we're going to put that in between here, and there we go. Now, the one thing we need to do is that thirdweb provider here, we need to make sure that that thirdweb provider is imported from our thirdweb.ts file. So we're just going to change this from thirdweb react to @/app/thirdweb. And now if I open up my terminal here and run yarn dev to run this locally here on my device, we should be brought up with the Next.js boiler template code. And there you go. Yep, there it is. So we know our application or our thirdweb Connect SDK has been configured and set up properly in our app. Let's close this here. Now we can start building out our application and start building out our Buy Me a Coffee app. To start building out our Buy Me a Coffee app, I'm going to come back to my files here and head on over to the page.tsx file. And in this page.tsx file, this is the boilerplate code that you get with a new Next project. I'm just going to grab all this code here and remove and delete it. And we're going to remove all those imports as well too. And I'm just going to give this here a div. And I'm going to give this div some styling here. This is just to center some of the content. So it's adding a flex, aligning the items in the center, giving it a view height of 100% and some margin on the top here. And I'm just going to give my application here a title, and we're going to call this a Buy Me a Coffee. So if I save that and come back to my app here, you can see here that we have our Buy Me a Coffee title right in the middle of our application. Now, I need a way for a user to connect to our application, right? In order to tip and send some funds, they're going to need a wallet to execute the transaction along with send the funds from that wallet. So at thirdweb's Connect SDK, we have a component here called the Connect embed. And what we're going to do with the Connect embed is we are going to provide it with our client from our client.ts file, and we can also give it our chain here from our chain.ts file. And I'm going to take the Connect embed and I'm going to come back to the thirdweb.ts file and also make sure that I export the Connect embed from here. So it's tagged with the use client. and make sure that it's imported in my page.tsx file from the app/thirdweb.ts file. And what this is going to do is coming back to my app, you can see here we have buy me a coffee, and we now have this little modal here that allows us to connect a wallet. We can connect via an in-app wallet. This is using a social login or email or phone number, or we can use a Web3 wallet, which we can click here. We can select MetaMask, Coinbase, Rainbow, or any wallet from these over 350 Web3 wallets here. You can search the name of the wallet that you're looking to connect with. You can have full customization over this modal as well. But this is how we're going to get a user now to connect a wallet to our application. So coming back here, I'm just going to give my header here just some margin on the bottom as well, so it can go a little space right there. So you see buy me a coffee, and then we're going to connect our wallet here. And once our wallet's connected, we want to show our Buy Me a Coffee application. So now we can start building out the actual application part. But first we need to get our contract so we can start interacting with the Buy Me a Coffee contract that we deployed earlier within this video. So coming into my file directory here, I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call this utils. And in this utils folder, I'm going to create a new file called contract.ts. And this is where we're going to create our wrapper for our smart contract. So what I'm going to do here is create a variable here. We'll just say contract address, and we're going to get our contract address of the contract that we just deployed. So let me come back here. Let's find our Buy Me a Coffee contract here. We're going to copy our contract address, come back here and paste that in. And then we're going to create that wrapper for this contract. We're going to export a variable here called contract, and we're going to use get contract from the thirdweb Connect SDK. And we need to provide it with a few things. The first thing is going to be our client, which we're going to provide it our client from our client.ts file. The next thing we're going to provide it is our chain from our chain.ts file. Then we provide it with the address, which is going to be the contract address that we stored right up there. And then finally, because this isn't a pre-built contract from thirdweb, and this is our own custom contract that we deployed ourselves, we're going to have to also provide it the ABI here. And that will just provide us an easy way to start interacting with the smart contract that we created. So to get our ABI, we're going to come over here back to our files. We're going to create a new file within our utils folder, and we're going to call this our contract abi.ts file. And we're going to export our contract ABI, and we're going to get this ABI. Oh, well, let's export const, and then we're going to come back to our contract. And to get your ABI, you're going to come to the left-hand navigation here. You're going to come to sources, and in your sources, you'll have your contract solidity file, which is the contract that we deployed. And then below that, you'll have, or all the way at the bottom, you should have your ABI here, which is your ABI for your contract. So we're going to copy that. We're going to come back to our code editor here, paste that in, and we're going to say as a constant here. And that is our contract ABI. So if we provide that to the ABI of our get contract here, so we'll say contract ABI, we can now resolve the methods from our contract, and we'll be able to call those methods easily within our project here using the Connect SDK. All right, so now we have our contract here. We can start interacting with it. We can start building out the components of our application. So I'm going to come back to my files. We're going to create a new folder here. We're going to call this folder our components folder. And in there, we're going to create a new file, and I'm going to call this the buymeacoffee.tsx. And we're going to create the Buy Me a Coffee component here. So we're going to export our Buy Me a Coffee here. What we want to do in this component is we only want to show this component if we know that there is a wallet connected to our application. And we can do this by using the useActiveAccount hook from the Connect SDK. So we're going to create a variable here. We're going to call this account. And what the useActiveAccount is going to do is check and see if there is a connected wallet or account to our application. If there is, it'll give us back the account information, or it'll return us undefined. And we can use that to say, hey, if this isn't defined and we don't have an account information, it means there's no wallet connected. We shouldn't show our application. So at the very top here, we're also going to make sure that we say use client here. And with this here, we can say if there is an account, then we can return our application here. So I'm just going to create a div here, and I'm going to get some styling here to give my div. This is just a div with a border, some padding, and some width here. And then the first thing we want to display is a wallet component where a user can see the information of their connected wallet. So we can actually use not the connect embed, but the connect button this time. And we can provide it with the client here from our client.ts file. We can also provide it with our chain from our chain.ts file. And if we save that and then come back to our application, again, this is just a connect button, not the whole modal. But if we come back to our app here, so again, we have our buy me a coffee, we have our connect modal. We shouldn't see anything else until we actually have a wallet connected to our application. So I'm just going to connect a MetaMask wallet here. And once we are connected, we should see a connect button, but I think I forgot to add this here to our page. So let's come back to page, and under our connect embed, we are going to add our buy me a coffee component. So now that we have that added and we come back, we should see our connect button here. There you go. So our little border here, and then we have our connect button right in here. Now I'm going to come back and I'm just going to wrap our connect button here with a div to center it. So right here, this div just has some styling to center and add a margin. So if we come back to our app here, there we go, got some margin, and we have our connect button. So in here, I could disconnect my, so with the wallet disconnected, you see here I'm brought back to kind of the login screen where I can connect a wallet again, connect a MetaMask, and this is where our Buy Me a Coffee application will be displayed. So now that we have that ability to connect a wallet and disconnect a wallet, we can start building the components to leave a message and a tip here. So coming back to the Buy Me a Coffee here, we're going to have some input fields for a user to put in the amount they want to leave for a tip and the message that they want to leave. So we're going to create some state variables here. The first one is going to be the tip amount. We'll say set tip amount, and we'll say use state, and we'll make the default here 0. And then we'll also create one here for the message, and we'll set the message default to just a blank string. And then below our div here with our connect wallet button, we'll create another div. We'll give that some styling of flex, and we'll make sure the flex direction is a column. Then we'll create a label. This is going to be for the first input, and that input is going to be for our tip amount. We'll just give it some styling here to make it a little bigger for the font size. Below that, we'll just add a little warning here. So we're going to say, hey, the value must be greater than 0. And then with some styling here with a font size, color, and margin. So if we save that and come back to our app here, you can see we have tip amount, and then we have a little warning here that says must be greater than 0. So you can't just send 0 funds and just send a message. We do need to make sure that there is a tip amount in there. Then below that, we're going to create our input. This input is going to be a number. This is going to be the value which we are going to submit when we call our Buy Me a Coffee function. The value is going to be our tip amount. The on-chain sets the tip amount. We'll create some steps here and say 0.01 for a step, so you can just increment it little by little if you want to. And then we have some styling here to add to our input field. So if I save that, again, we're just setting this to our state variable for our tip amount here, adding some styling in here. And we come back, you can see here, we can now increment. Why isn't it incrementing? Set tip amount, this should be a number. There we go. So we come back here. There we go. Now we can increment this by 0.01, and we can put in whatever tip amount we want. Next, we need to do the same thing. We need an input field for the message that we want to send with our Buy Me a Coffee here. So under our input here, we're going to create another label. This one is going to be for our message here. And with this, we're going to create our next input. And this is going to be a text here because this is going to be the message that we send with our tip. The value is going to be our message. The on-chain is going to set the message to whatever is in our input here. We'll set a placeholder here, and then we'll say enter a message. And then we'll add some styling here, which will be the same styling that we had above here in this input. So coming back here, we now have our two input fields. We have the tip amount field and we have the message. So we can say this is a tip for doing a great job. And then once we have the tip amount, we'll just put this down a little bit. And we have a message. We should be able to then call our buy me a coffee function from our contract, and that should emit that information onto the blockchain. Now we do need to add a button here. So what we want to add is a button, but we don't want the button to appear if there isn't a tip amount or if there isn't a message. We want to make sure that the user fills out these two things prior to being able to press the transaction button. So we're going to come here, and under this div, we're going to say, hey, there needs to be a message and the tip amount needs to be greater than 0. If it is, then we can then display the button. Now with the Connect SDK, we do have a component here called a transaction button. And this is going to allow us to easily call functions and execute functions from a smart contract. And then we're just going to call this, give it a text here of say, buy a coffee, which is just going to submit the tip and message. Now in the transaction button, we need to provide it with a transaction. And this transaction, we are going to use a hook here called prepare contract call. And this is going to be a execution of a function that we are going to prepare here that our transaction button is going to then execute. So in here, we're going to say the contract that we are going to call this function from is our contract from our contract.ts file. The method is going to be the function that we're going to call. And you can see here we have our two functions, which is buy me a coffee or get the total coffee. We're going to be calling it the buy me a coffee function here. And then we need to provide it the parameters for that function, which in this case, we do need to provide the message and the amount of funds we want to send. But because we are using native funds, that is going to be set with the value of the transaction that we're executing. So the only parameter that we need to send when calling this buy me a coffee function is the message. So we're going to take the message from the input here, provide that. And then below here, we're going to then set the value of the function that we're calling. And we're going to set that to the tip amount. Now we do need to provide this in way. So the tip amount we're going to be providing it is going to be like an ether value like 0.01. We do need to provide the way amount, and we also need to provide it as a big int. So we're going to say big int here, and then we're going to use the two-way from thirdweb, and we're going to provide it the tip amount, .toString, and there we go. So again, we're providing it with a big int of the way amount. So we're converting the way amount of our tip amount here. So we're getting the way and then changing it to a big int, and we're supplying that as the value in which we are sending with the function here that we're calling. So that is the transaction, and that's what the transaction button is going to execute here. We can say when the transaction is confirmed, we can do a few things. We'll first alert saying that we'll say, thank you for the coffee. We'll set the tip amount to 0. We'll set the message back to a blank string again, and that should then reset all of that. Then we're going to just add here some styling for this button and save that. So if I come back to my app here, you can see here now we have a buy a coffee button, and we can just add a, let's say, a width here of 100%. There you go. So now if I were to remove this message, you can see there is no longer a button, right? We want to make sure that there is a tip amount. So even if this was 0 and I started writing a message here, you can see I don't get the button, but once I add a tip amount and I have a message, I can then execute the function that says buy a coffee. So right here, we're going to tip 0.01 and we're going to say the message is this is a message. So we'll just say buy a coffee. We get a transaction here that pops up. You can see this is the 0.01 here that we are going to be transferring with the execution of our function. And we're going to hit confirm. And once that's done, you can see there, it says thank you for a coffee. It resets everything here. And we now have tipped 0.01 of ETH with the message here. Now we want to be able to display those messages of the messages that people leave when they have tips. And right now we can only execute the buy me a coffee function. But if I come back to my contract here and I go to the events here on the left-hand navigation, you can see that we have a new coffee here. We ran the transaction, it emitted this event, which was new coffee, which was the name of our event from our smart contract. And if we click on that, you can see the new coffee here has the information of our sender, which is the wallet address that sent the tip. We have the message here, which says this is a message, and we have a timestamp here of when this tip was sent. Next thing we're going to do is gather this information here from our smart contract and from the blockchain and display it on our application. So what we'll have to do is get that information. So we're going to get the events so we can display that information like the message, the time, and who sent it, along with the total count of how many coffee tips that we got. If you remember from our smart contract, we created that variable and function that increments every time someone sends us a coffee. So we'll gather that information as well. So we're going to create a few variables here, and we're going to be using a hook from the Connect SDK called the useRead contract. And this is going to return us back data, which this one would call total coffee. And again, we're going to use the useRead contract hook. And this useRead contract, we're specifying the contract that we are reading the function from, which is going to be our contract from our contract.ts file. The method that we are going to call from our contract, this is going to be the get total coffee function. And that is going to provide us back with the total amount of coffee. So in this case, it should return us back 1. Now I'm also going to create a refetch here, and we're going to call this refetch total coffee. And every time someone leaves a coffee or you leave a coffee here, let's go back to our transaction button. We're going to say refetch the total amount of coffees. Next, we're going to get the events. So similar to how we use the useRead contract, we're going to use the use contract events hook from the Connect SDK. This is going to return us back data as well. And we'll call this our contract events. And we'll give it a refetch here too, and we'll say refetch contract events. And this is going to equal the use contract events hook here. All we need to do here is just provided the contract that it's supposed to be reading the events from, which is our contract from our contract.ts file. So again, we're getting the total amount of coffee and the contract events. So if I scroll down here, now let's display that information. I'm going to create a div right over here. And then we're just going to create a heading at 3 here to display our total coffees. So we'll just say total coffees. And what we're going to display here is our total coffee .toString. We'll just give this some styling here. Come back to our app. Ooh, wrong app. This one right here. You can see total coffees, and we have 1 because we sent 1 earlier. So this is again reading that data from our smart contract. Now let's display some of those recent messages that have been sent. So if we come here, we'll just create some text here that says recent coffees. Give this some styling here as well. So we come back here and we look at the use contract events here. This contract event is going to be an array of all the events that have been emitted to our contract. Now we want to display all of those events. So what we're going to do is map through that array and display the message, the timestamp, and the wallet address that sent the tip and message. So coming down here, what we're going to do here is we're first going to make sure that we have our contract events, and we want to make sure that contract events dot length is greater than 0. We don't want it. We want to make sure that there are actual events on the contract to display. If not, there's nothing that we can display. And what we'll do here is we're going to map through our contract events. The only thing here is the array of events is going to be in reverse chronological order. So we want to make sure that we flip and reverse the way that the events are displayed in our application. So we're going to take our contract events and we are going to then reverse it. And then we are going to then map through them, which will give us back a event. So our individual event plus the index of that event. So we're going to create a div here, and we'll say here that this key is going to be our index. And then we'll give this a little bit of styling to give it look more like a card. And then in that div, we're going to create another div here. And we're just going to give this some styling here. And in that div, we're going to display some text here. And we're going to display the wallet address. So what I'm going to do is actually create a function here to just truncate the wallet address for us. So we don't need to display the whole wallet address. So right here, I'm just going to create a function that says truncate wallet address. It takes our full address, but it'll only show us the first 6 digits and the last 4 digits of the wallet here. We're also going to create another function here called convert date, which is going to take our timestamp, which gets returned to us as a big int. We're just going to change that first to a number and then convert that number to a date, a proper date that we can display. So coming back down over here within our top here, we're going to display our wallet address first. So right over here, I have a text with some styling, and then we're going to truncate the wallet address, which we're going to get our event. We can get the arguments from the event, and then we're going to display the sender, which is the wallet address. And then we're going to also show the date. So again, some text here with some styling, and we're going to convert the date, which we're going to get the event and arguments and our timestamp back from the event here. So if we come back to our application, you can see here, this was our one coffee that we left tipped, which was a few minutes ago. And then over here, we have the wallet address that sent it, which is our wallet address right over here, ending in B8, B2. Next thing we need to do is just display the message at the bottom here. So outside of this div here, we're going to add our message, which we're just going to add some styling of color. And then we're going to just display the event arguments and the message from there. So coming back now, it'll say this is a message, which is the last message that we sent. So now we'll be able to view the recent messages sent over here, and it should be in chronological order. So if we do one more, so let's just say point 1. Actually, let's try this from a different wallet here. So let me switch wallets. And before I switch, you can see here that I have 1.427. So there we go. We switched wallet. I'm going to send 0.01, and I'm going to say this is a test from another wallet. You can see we have our buy a coffee button that appears here. We click on that. We get a transaction here. There's the 0.01 that we're going to be sending with this transaction. Let's confirm it. There you go. Thank you for the coffee. You can see here that our value increases to 2. And then we have our newest message here that displays, which is this is a test from another wallet. And the wallet address for this one is B394. And that was sent right now, which is just a few seconds ago. And there you have it. We built a very simple Web3 Buy Me a Coffee application where a user can tip someone and leave a message. In our application, we'll be able to execute that tip and message feature and call the function from our contract, along with displaying some of the events that get emitted, which will display things like the wallet address, the message, and the date and time that the message or tip was left. And we built this all using thirdweb's tools, from building and deploying the smart contract to building out the Web3 front end using the Connect SDK. So again, I hope you folks enjoyed this video. You found some value in it. If you did, give this video a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out on tutorial videos just like this. If you need any help or support, you can open up a support ticket and our support team will be happy to help you out. A link down in the description will be provided if you need any of that assistance. But again, I hope you folks enjoyed this video, and until next time, see ya.